created our table view and we've done some things with it, we now want to be able to populate it from somewhere besides just an array. It's kind of a pain to put all that stuff in code itself. So what we're going to do is create something that's called a plist. Plists is a property list. So I'm going to do a two-finger click, again do a add new file. Now I want a resource file, it's called, and so it's called a property list. I'm just going to click on that. We'll make its name just one word and call it property list. It's going to create it for me, show just one. We're going to learn a little bit more about dictionaries and how these work too. But first I want to change this from a dictionary to an array. With the array, I'm then going to add an object. I'm actually going to change this from a string to a dictionary. I'm going to open that one up and add a couple objects in here. I'm going to add 3. So we're going to call this first one title, the second one description, and the third one we're going to call image. Now the first thing I need to do is I need to actually get an image. So I've downloaded one that's called Brisket. I'm actually just going to drag it over here. And we're going to say copy it to items if needed. And click finish. I'm going to grab the name of it, which was brisket.png. It looks good, as you can see. Come back and I'm just going to put it in there. I'm actually just going to call it brisket. Now if I was using a JPEG image, I'd actually need to put the .jpeg in it. But because it's a PNG, iOS knows how to handle it. So then I'm going to put in here the title of brisket. Description is some really good tasting stuff. So I'm going to leave it like that. I've created one item and we should be able to show that on our table view now. So I'm going to come back to my view controller and the first thing I need to do is actually get that information from that plist. So I'm going to create an NS string called path, and that's going to be equal to NS bundle main bundle path for resource, and I'm going to put in the name of it, which we just called property list, and it's of type plist. Once I've got the path, now I need to get a NS array. We're going to just call it array. Actually, we'll just use our other array. That'll be even easier. And just go array, then set it equal to NS array alloc init with contents of file path. So let's talk about what we just did here. So all of these files off on the left hand side are all part of our bundle, this main bundle. All we've done is say, hey, our name of our resource is property list and it's of type plist. It's going to get that path, it's going to populate the array, and now the only thing we have to change down here is the string to display. So first we're going to get an NS dictionary. We're going to call it dictionary, and then we're going to say this is now array at index path dot row is our dictionary. So now we need to get the title from the dictionary. So we're in dictionary, and we have the quick way to get the title. We're just going to call it title because that's what we put in our property list, was a lowercase title. We spelled it right. Now when we click run, I'm actually going to put a breakpoint right there. It's going to hit our breakpoint. I put it in the breakpoint just by clicking where it has the line numbers, or off on the left hand side. Now we can see all of our variables here. So I'm just going to do a two-finger click on dictionary and click print description of dictionary. We can see there's all of our stuff that we had in there before. We'll click the play button and now we see brisket there. So the next thing I want to be able to do is I actually want to be able to pass this information from this view controller onto the next. So what I'm going to do is in my detail view controller.h, I'm going to create a public property. Property, non-atomic, strong. We're going to call it NS dictionary and we'll call it info dictionary. Now that we've got our info dictionary, I'm going to come back to our did select row at index path. I'm going to copy and paste this dictionary right here. and paste it down here, and then I'm going to come down and do dvc dot, and we just have to find that info dictionary property. And we're able to set it just by setting dictionary. Now when I go into my view did load over here, I can build and run this, and we'll see what we're getting back. So I can see that I've got my brisket still. I click on that, and it comes up on my debugger, and I can do a printout self.info dictionary. And it prints out all of the information that I had there. So the next thing I want to do is I want to be able to show that image on this screen. So I'm going to push stop, come back here. We'll get rid of that breakpoint just by clicking and holding and dragging off. Next, I'm going to do a UI image view. We'll just call it IV, and then UI image view, allocate it. We're going to initialize it with a frame, CG rect make. We'll put it at 100, 100, 100, 100. Now I'm using frames for these tutorials just because it's quick and easy, and so I don't have to go through all the steps of setting up the visual formatting. But you can go ahead and do that so that you've got a nice looking application. I'm going to do iv.image. Now an image view contains an image as a property. We create an UI image by saying UI image named, and all I have to do is pass in info dictionary, self.info dictionary, and I'm going to pass in what it's called. So we called it image, if I remember right. Let's go back to our property list. We called it image. Swipe left. Now all I do is do a self.view, add subview, IV, and build and run. Now I can click on it, it goes over, and there's my image. It looks a little scawampus, so let's actually make a quick change. We'll go to iv.content mode. Now when I click on content mode, it tells me that a UI view content mode. Let's click on that, and we can see we've got all these different options of how to draw this. I just want to do an aspect fit. That's going to scale my contents and make it look nice. Build and run. And now I've got my brisket. I click on it, and you can see that that looks better. So I've done a few things with this tutorial. We've gone over PLists. We've gone over how to show an image, which we can see is pretty simple. We've gone over how to pass information between view controllers when we are creating a new view controller and passing it. So the one thing we have left is we may want to store information about a user. We can do this using what we call NSUser Defaults. We'll just call them defaults for me. And then we do an NSUser Defaults, standard user defaults. Now this gives us access to an area of the application that we can be able to store off information about a user. We may want to store a username or a password or where they're at or something like that. All we have to do is do a defaults set object. We'll just call it test for key. So defaults really is a dictionary that we're storing information through. After we set something in defaults though, we need to tell defaults to synchronize. What that does is essentially saves that information that we've just set off so that we can use it later. Or if the application quits or things like that, we can still get that information. Now if I wanted to get that information later, I could just pull it down a little bit and do defaults, object for key. And I know I've got a string in there, so I'm just going to do an ns string equals. We'll do an ns log of string. So when we build and run this, we should see test printed out in there. Now it's saying, hey, this may not be the best way to do it, so we're actually going to do our %@ like that. And now we've got that passed in there. The string's going to display nicely. So we should see our string being displayed that we just stored in our defaults. We click down here and we can see it says test just like we expect it to. So for this so far, we've added that NSUser Defaults now. Now we know a couple of different ways that we can store off information. We can store them in PLists if we're just going to read from it. We can create a PList on the code side if we need to. But for this case, we're not going to want to do that. The other thing we can do is use the NSUser Defaults. And those are the two things that we've learned so far of how to manipulate and store data without putting it straight into code itself.